The sterile hum of the Boeing 787 was a familiar lullaby for Ricardo Edmond, CEO of Edmond Technologies. He was en route to a high-stakes tech summit in Tokyo, his mind already dissecting market projections and potential mergers. His tailored suit, a second skin of success, offered little comfort against the gnawing emptiness that even his sprawling empire couldn't fill. He glanced out the window at the endless blue, a vast canvas mirroring the void within him. A sudden jolt of turbulence, more aggressive than usual, pulled his attention back into the cabin. That's when he saw her. For a moment, time warped. The world outside the airplane, his carefully constructed future, even the very air in his lungs, seemed to freeze. Sitting in economy, just 7 rows ahead, her usually vibrant auburn hair now muted, her face etched with an unfamiliar fragility, was Ruth. Ruth Kelso, his ex-wife. The woman he hadn't seen in 5 years, the woman he had irrevocably broken. And she was pregnant. Ricardo's breath hitched. The carefully constructed walls around his heart, built brick by painful brick after their divorce, crumbled instantly. He watched, transfixed, as a wave of nausea visibly swept over her. Her hand instinctively went to her swollen belly, a protective gesture that twisted a knife in his gut. He knew that gesture. He had seen it, albeit briefly, once before, in another lifetime, another reality. Before his ambition had consumed everything, including their shared dream of a family. The turbulence intensified, rattling the cabin. Ruth, her face now alarmingly pale, clutched the armrest, her knuckles white. Her eyes, once sparkling with life, were now wide with a fear that echoed a primal scream in Ricardo's soul. He started to rise, a wordless plea forming on his lips, a desperate urge to cross the chasm of those 7 rows, those 5 years, those countless mistakes. But before he could take a single step, before he could articulate the tumultuous storm raging within him, her eyes rolled back. She slumped forward, a silent, horrifying collapse against the unresponsive seatbelt. A strangled gasp escaped Ricardo's throat. The world, which had momentarily frozen, now lurched into a terrifying, slow-motion nightmare. Passengers nearby stirred, a ripple of alarm spreading through the cabin. The flight attendant, a young woman with an overly practiced smile, was still further down the aisle. Ricardo didn't think. He reacted. He burst from his first-class seat, his polished shoes thudding against the carpeted floor, the hushed elegance of the cabin shattered by the sudden urgency of his movements. Every instinct, every long-buried emotion surged to the surface. He had to reach her. He had to save her. As he scrambled past the bewildered gazers, a kaleidoscope of their past flashed before his eyes. Their wedding day, her joyous laughter, the quiet evenings spent dreaming of a future, the devastating arguments, the cold finality of the divorce papers. All of it, a brutal montage, propelling him forward. He reached her row, his hand outstretched, his voice finally finding its way out of his constricted throat. "Ruth," he rasped, the name a raw, desperate prayer. The flight attendant, alerted by the commotion, was now rushing towards them, her practiced smile replaced by a look of panicked concern. A man in the adjacent seat fumbled for his phone, ready to alert the crew. But Ricardo was already there, kneeling beside Ruth, his hand hovering over her, unsure of what to do, yet desperate to do something. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy. The faint sheen of sweat on her forehead, the delicate blue veins beneath her translucent skin, every detail screamed vulnerability. And with it, a crushing wave of guilt washed over him. This was his fault, all of it. He carefully placed his fingers on her wrist, searching for a pulse, his own heart hammering against his ribs. It was there, faint but steady. A wave of relief, so profound it nearly buckled his knees, washed over him. "We need a doctor!" he yelled, his voice hoarse, cutting through the growing murmur of concerned passengers. The flight attendant, finally reaching them, was already on the intercom, her voice tight with urgency. Ricardo looked at Ruth, truly looked at her, for the first time in years. The passage of time had etched lines of experience around her eyes, but the fundamental beauty, the spirit that had once captivated him, was still there, albeit dimmed by unconsciousness, and, he now realized, the profound exhaustion of pregnancy. He saw the faint stretch marks already forming on her belly, a testament to the new life within her. A life, he suddenly understood with gut-wrenching clarity, that was half hers, half someone else's. The realization was a cold splash of water on the burning embers of his reawakened love, a stark reminder of the unbridgeable chasm that now lay between them. Yet, even with that painful truth, the desperate urge to protect her, to care for her, remained undiminished. He had destroyed their past, but perhaps, just perhaps, he could still play a part in securing her future. Or at least, the future of the innocent life she carried. The flight attendant returned, a first aid kit in hand, her eyes darting between Ricardo and Ruth. Do you know her?" she asked, her voice hushed, sensing the unspoken drama unfolding before her. Ricardo nodded, unable to speak, his gaze fixed on Ruth's pale face. A doctor, a kind-faced woman with sensible glasses, was making her way through the narrow aisle, guided by the flight attendant. As she knelt beside Ruth, checking her pulse and pupils, Ricardo felt a strange detachment, as if he were watching a scene from a movie, a terrible, heartbreaking drama in which he was an unwilling, yet undeniably central character. He had built an empire, conquered markets, commanded thousands, but at this moment he felt utterly powerless, a mere bystander to the fragile dance of life and death unfolding before him. The doctor, Mary Ortega, a seasoned pediatrician on her way to a medical conference, quickly assessed Ruth. "She's severely dehydrated, and her blood sugar is low," Dr. Ortega announced, her voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the rising tension in the cabin. And given her pregnancy, that's a serious concern. Ricardo felt a cold dread seep into his bones. Dehydration, low blood sugar, simple things, easily preventable. But for Ruth, alone and pregnant, they had become critical. The doctor began administering an IV drip, her movements precise and efficient. Ricardo watched, his mind racing, 1,000 questions forming, each one a sharp jab of guilt. Why was she alone? Why was she in economy? Why did she look so thin? The Ruth he knew, the woman he had married, was vibrant, full of life, rarely without a healthy glow. This Ruth was a ghost, a shadow of her former self. "Are you family?" Dr. Ortega asked Ricardo, her gaze piercing. He hesitated. Her ex-husband, he finally managed, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The declaration hung in the air, thick with unspoken history, drawing curious glances from the surrounding passengers. He felt their judgment, a collective weight of condemnation, and he knew he deserved every bit of it. Mary Ortega nodded, her expression unreadable. "Well, she needs rest and fluids. We're fortunate we're still over land, but we're a long way from a hospital." Ricardo's mind, always analytical, clicked into overdrive. "Can we arrange an emergency landing?" he asked, his voice firm despite the turmoil within him. "I'll cover all costs, any inconvenience. We need to get her to a medical facility." The flight attendant looked at him, surprised. "Sir, emergency landings are—" "I understand the protocols," Ricardo interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "But this is an emergency. Her life, and her baby's life, could be at risk. I'll personally ensure every passenger is compensated, every rescheduled flight, every hotel. Just tell me what's required." The flight attendant, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden intensity of the situation and the unexpected generosity, stammered, I'll have to speak to the captain." As she moved away, Ricardo turned back to Ruth. Her eyes were still closed, but a faint flush had begun to return to her cheeks, a hopeful sign. He noticed the worn fabric of her simple cotton dress, the slightly frayed edges of her cardigan. This was not the Ruth who had once graced magazine covers by his side, adorned in designer clothes and sparkling jewels. This was a woman stripped bare, vulnerable, a stark contrast to the opulence of his first-class existence. The disparity between their lives, a chasm of his own making, hit him with brutal force. He reached out, his hand trembling, and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. Her skin was still cool to the touch. A vivid memory, unbidden, flashed through his mind. Ruth, radiant in her wedding dress, her eyes shining with love, promising him forever. He had scoffed at forever back then, prioritizing quarterly reports over shared sunsets, market share over marital intimacy. He had convinced himself that she would understand, that she would appreciate the empire he was building for them, for their future. He had been a fool, a truly magnificent fool. Minutes later, the flight attendant returned, her face a mixture of relief and professional calm. "Mr. Edmund, the captain has agreed to divert. We'll be landing in Anchorage within the hour. An ambulance will be waiting on the tarmac." Ricardo simply nodded, a tight knot of anxiety loosening in his chest. Anchorage. A desolate, wind-swept city, far from the gleaming skyscrapers of his corporate world. But at this moment, it was salvation. He remained by Ruth's side, a silent, watchful sentinel. Dr. Ortega continued to monitor her, occasionally murmuring reassurances. Other passengers, their initial shock giving way to concern, offered blankets and water. Ricardo, usually aloof and unapproachable, found himself accepting their gestures with a humble nod, his usual carefully constructed facade of invincibility completely shattered. As the plane began its descent, the cabin lights dimmed, casting long shadows. Ruth stirred, a soft groan escaping her lips. Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Her gaze, unfocused at first, slowly settled on Ricardo. Recognition, slow and agonizing, dawned in her eyes. A flicker of surprise, then confusion, and finally a deep, weary sadness. "Ricardo," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a potent mix of disbelief and pain. He leaned closer, his heart thudding. "Ruth, you're okay. We're landing soon. A doctor is here." He gestured to Dr. Ortega, who offered a gentle smile. Ruth's eyes, still clouded with weakness, moved from Ricardo to her swollen belly, then back to him. The question, unasked, hung heavy in the air between them. "What are you doing here?" And more profoundly, "Why do you care?" He knew he couldn't answer those questions. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The chasm between them was too vast, the wounds too deep. But at this moment, as the plane's wheels touched down with a gentle bump, as the relief of a safe landing washed over the cabin, all he could do was meet her gaze, his own eyes pleading for a chance, any chance, to atone for the man he had been, for the pain he had inflicted. The journey to Tokyo was forgotten. His empire, his deals, his carefully orchestrated future, all faded into insignificance. All that mattered was Ruth and the fragile life within her. The whisper of their past, a painful echo, filled the silence, and Ricardo knew with absolute certainty that his life had irrevocably changed course. The ambulance ride to the Anchorage hospital was a blur of flashing lights and hushed medical jargon. Ricardo rode with Ruth, his hand never leaving her arm, a silent anchor in a storm of uncertainty. Dr. Ortega, having graciously offered to accompany them, continued to monitor Ruth's vitals, her presence a comforting shield against Ricardo's mounting anxiety. At the hospital, Ruth was immediately taken in for further examination. Ricardo paced the sterile waiting room, the fluorescent lights humming an oppressive tune. His phone, usually a constant extension of his hand, lay forgotten in his pocket. His assistant, no doubt frantic about his unscheduled disappearance, would have to wait. His world had shrunk to the confines of this small Alaskan hospital, to the fate of the woman he once loved, and the child he didn't even know existed until an hour ago. Mary Ortega joined him after a while, a thoughtful expression on her face. She's stable. The baby is also stable, thankfully. But she's severely anemic and dangerously underweight. She admitted she hasn't been eating properly for weeks. Ricardo felt a fresh wave of guilt, sharp and relentless. "Why?" he managed, his voice a rough whisper. "What happened to her?" Dr. Ortega looked at him, her gaze surprisingly direct. "That's a question perhaps only you can answer, Mr. Edmund. Or rather, a question she might choose to answer for you." She paused. "She's asking for you, by the way." His heart lurched. Ruth, asking for him, after everything. He nodded, a silent promise to himself to face whatever truth awaited him. He found her in a private room, the sterile white walls doing little to diminish the profound sense of vulnerability that clung to her. She looked smaller, frailer in the hospital gown, her auburn hair fanned out against the crisp white pillow. Her eyes, still holding a hint of their former fire, met his as he entered. "Ricardo," she said, her voice stronger now, but still laced with an unmistakable weariness. "What are you doing here?" He pulled up a chair by her bedside, the polite distance between them a stark reminder of the emotional chasm. "I was on the same flight. I saw you collapse." He chose his words carefully, avoiding any mention of the crushing weight of their shared past. "I had the pilot divert to Anchorage." A flicker of surprise, then something akin to gratitude, softened her features. You did that for me?" He nodded. "And for the baby." He finally allowed himself to look at her belly, a gentle curve beneath the thin blanket. "Ruth, who is the father?" The question, though necessary, felt like a betrayal, a brutal intrusion into her private grief. Her gaze hardened, a shield falling into place. "That's not your concern, Ricardo." "It is if you're in this condition," he countered, his voice firm but not aggressive. "Ruth, you're malnourished. You're anemic. You clearly haven't been taking care of yourself." "What happened after we divorced?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips, a sound that twisted his gut. "What happened?" "You happened, Ricardo. Or rather, the aftermath of you happened." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, a raw, unflinching look in their depths. "After the divorce, you cut me off, completely. Every asset frozen, every account drained. You left me with nothing. Nothing but the shame and the debris of a broken life." His blood ran cold. He had done that. He remembered the ruthlessness, the calculated precision with which he had severed all ties, ensuring she couldn't touch his fortune. He had justified it as protecting his business, ensuring no future claims. He had called it a clean break. He realized now, with sickening clarity, that it had been an act of pure, unadulterated cruelty. I didn't realize," he stammered, the words hollow even to his own ears. "I thought you had family, support." "My family disowned me after our divorce," she interjected, her voice devoid of emotion, yet brimming with unspoken pain. They said I was a gold digger, that I'd thrown away my chance at a good life. They never understood. They never saw the real you, the man who valued power more than love. He flinched. The accusation, though brutal, was undeniably true. He had been that man. He had sacrificed everything, including her, on the altar of his ambition. So I started over, she continued, her gaze drifting to the window, to the stark Alaskan landscape. I found a job as a waitress. It wasn't much, but it was honest. I was slowly rebuilding. And then I met Leo. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a fragile blossom in a barren landscape. He was kind, Ricardo. Truly kind. He saw me, not your ex-wife, not the woman who failed, but just me. We fell in love. A pang of jealousy, sharp and unexpected, pierced Ricardo's heart. Kindness, a quality he had long since discarded in his pursuit of power. He was an artist, she continued, a wistful note entering her voice, struggling but full of passion. We were happy, despite everything. We were building a life together, a small, humble life. But it was ours. And then I got pregnant. She placed a hand on her belly, a protective, almost reverent gesture. It was a surprise, but a wonderful one. We were so excited. Her voice faltered, a tremor of pain running through it. But then Leo got sick. A rare, aggressive form of leukemia. It happened so fast. We used all our savings for his treatment, but it wasn't enough. He died 3 months ago. Her voice broke, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. He never got to meet our baby. Ricardo stared at her, utterly devastated. Leo, a struggling artist, a kind man, the father of her child, dead, and she had been left with nothing again. The full weight of his past actions, the domino effect of his cruelty, crashed down on him with the force of a tidal wave. He had not only destroyed her, but inadvertently, he had contributed to the desperate circumstances that had led to Leo's struggle, to Ruth's destitution, to the precarious health of her unborn child. He had not merely broken a marriage, he had shattered a life and, inadvertently, taken another. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of the hospital machines. Ricardo, the astute businessman, the ruthless negotiator, the titan of industry, felt utterly helpless. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to offer apologies that now seemed woefully inadequate. But what could he say? What could he do? His words felt meaningless against the backdrop of her profound grief and his monumental failures. Ruth, he finally managed, his voice thick with unshed tears. I am so incredibly sorry. The words felt small, insignificant. I had no idea. I truly had no idea you were going through this. She finally turned to him, her eyes glistening, but no longer with tears of weakness, but with a simmering resentment. No, you wouldn't have. You never looked back, did you, Ricardo? You never cared to see the wreckage you left behind. He deserved that. He deserved every ounce of her anger, her bitterness. But beyond the pain, a new resolve began to solidify within him. He had been a monster, consumed by ambition, blind to the human cost of his relentless pursuit of power. But he wouldn't be that man anymore. Not if he could help it. He had ruined her past, but perhaps, just perhaps, he could still salvage her future, and the future of her child. A flicker of hope, fragile but persistent, ignited within him. The road to redemption would be long, arduous, and fraught with the ghosts of his past. But for Ruth, and for the life she carried, he was willing to walk it. The following days in Anchorage were a purgatorial blur for Ricardo. He remained by Ruth's side, though often at a respectful distance, observing her slow but steady recovery. He arranged for the finest medical care, quietly ensuring she received everything she needed, from specialized consultations to nutritional supplements. He booked a suite in the nearest upscale hotel, a stark contrast to the small, functional rooms Ruth had likely been accustomed to. Ruth, while accepting the medical assistance, maintained a guarded demeanor towards him. Her gratitude was evident in the subtle softening of her gaze, the occasional nod of acknowledgement, but the wall between them remained. Their conversations were brief, clipped, revolving around medical updates and logistical arrangements. He learned more about Leo through Dr. Ortega and through the quiet, melancholic photos Ruth kept on her phone. A smiling man with kind eyes, holding a paintbrush, his arm around Ruth, her face radiant with happiness. Each image was a fresh stab of jealousy, a painful reminder of the love she had found after him, a love he had unknowingly helped to destroy. One afternoon, as Ruth was slowly sipping a protein shake, she finally broke the silence that often filled the room. "Ricardo," she began, her voice carefully neutral, "I appreciate what you've done. The emergency landing, the hospital, everything. But you don't have to stay." He met her gaze directly. "I want to. And I need to. Ruth, I realize now the extent of the damage I caused. I was a different person then. Blind, self-absorbed." He paused, searching for the right words that felt inadequate in the face of her suffering. "I want to help, to make amends." A faint, almost imperceptible scoff escaped her lips. "Make amends? Ricardo, you took everything. You left me with nothing, not once, but twice. How do you make amends for that?" Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of years of pain. "I know I can't undo the past," he conceded, his voice heavy with remorse. "But I can help you build a future. For you and for your child. A secure future. Financially, emotionally, however you need it." He hesitated, then plunged forward. "I want to ensure you both have everything you need. Medical care, a home, security. Whatever you want. No strings attached." She looked at him, her eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion in their depths. "No strings attached? That's not the Ricardo Edmund I remember. There were always strings, always a price." "This time there isn't," he insisted, his gaze unwavering. "This is about atonement, Ruth, about righting a terrible wrong. I can see now how profoundly I failed you. I was so consumed by my own ambition, I couldn't see anything else. I shut you out, I destroyed our life together, and then I compounded that cruelty by leaving you destitute. I regret it more than you can possibly imagine." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to discern the sincerity of his words. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken accusations and tentative hopes. Finally she exhaled, a long, weary sigh. "What do you propose?" "First, you need to regain your strength," he said, seizing the small opening. "You and the baby need a safe, comfortable place to recover. I've already arranged for a private jet to take you back to wherever you want to go. And a place to live, a comfortable home. Not a hotel." She shook her head. "I can't just take that, Ricardo. It feels wrong. Like charity." "It's not charity," he countered, his voice gentle. "It's restitution. It's the least I can do. Think of it as a belated repayment for everything I took from you. And it's for the baby, Ruth. You need to be healthy for him or her." The mention of the baby seemed to soften her resistance. She looked down at her hands, twisting the hospital bracelet on her wrist. I was planning to go to Portland. My old roommate, Jessica, offered me a place to stay while I figured things out." "Portland it is," he said, a surge of relief washing over him. "I'll arrange everything. A comfortable apartment, close to good medical facilities. And I'll set up a trust fund for the baby, something to ensure their future, no matter what." She finally looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a fragile hope. "A trust fund? Ricardo, that's too much." "Nothing is too much," he said firmly. "Not for what I owe you, and not for the child. This child deserves a future, Ruth. A life free from the struggles you've endured." He paused, his gaze earnest. "Please just let me do this. Let me help you." Another long silence. He held his breath, aware that everything hinged on her decision. He had pushed her away once, abandoned her. Now he was begging for a chance to re-enter her life, not as a lover, not as a husband, but as a repentant wrongdoer, a silent guardian. Finally she nodded, a slow, almost imperceptible movement. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Okay, Ricardo." For the baby, a wave of profound relief washed over him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Perhaps never. But it was a start, a tentative truce in a war he had unwittingly waged against her. He knew this would be a long, arduous journey, fraught with emotional landmines and the ghosts of their past. But for the first time in years, a sense of purpose, of genuine, selfless purpose, filled the void in his heart. He had spent a lifetime chasing power and wealth, only to find true meaning in the desperate fight for Ruth's well-being and the future of her unborn child. The path to redemption began here, in this sterile hospital room in Anchorage, with a broken woman and a second chance he truly didn't deserve. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to pay whatever price was required, to truly atone for his past. The private jet Ricardo arranged was a luxurious cocoon, a stark contrast to the cramped economy cabin where their paths had so dramatically re-intersected. Ruth, still frail but visibly stronger, watched the Alaskan landscape recede, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Ricardo sat a few rows away, giving her space, yet his gaze often drifted to her, a silent vigil. The flight to Portland was long, filled with the unspoken weight of their shared history. Ruth mostly slept or stared out the window, lost in thought. Ricardo, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of activity, albeit a quiet one. He was on his satellite phone, discreetly arranging the apartment, ensuring it was furnished to her taste, stocked with healthy food, and equipped with a full-time, discreet medical assistant for her recovery. He even arranged for a trusted personal chef specializing in prenatal nutrition. He was leaving no stone unturned, pouring all his considerable resources into her well-being. Upon arrival in Portland, they were met by a team of Ricardo's carefully vetted staff. A comfortable, spacious apartment in a quiet, leafy neighborhood awaited Ruth. It was tastefully decorated, with soft, natural tones and an abundance of light, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital room and the bleakness she had described of her previous life. Ruth walked through it, a quiet awe in her eyes, a testament to Ricardo's meticulous attention to detail. "This is beautiful, Ricardo," she said, her voice softer than he'd heard it in years. "But it's too much. I was just going to stay with Jessica. Jessica is welcome to visit any time," he replied, his voice gentle. "But you need your own space, Ruth. You need to focus on your health and on the baby. This is just a place for you to recover, to find your footing. No pressure, no expectations." He could see the internal struggle in her eyes, the ingrained independence clashing with the undeniable comfort and security he was offering. Finally, she sighed, a small, weary sound. "Thank you, Ricardo." The words were hesitant, but genuine. Over the next few weeks, Ricardo established a routine. He would fly to Portland every few days, checking in on her, ensuring all her needs were met. He never overstayed his welcome, never pressed for details about her past, never brought up their shared history unless she did. He simply observed, a silent presence, a provider of comfort and security. Slowly, subtly, the walls around Ruth began to lower. The healthy food, the restful environment, the constant medical attention, all contributed to her physical recovery. Her skin regained its healthy glow, her eyes lost their haunted look, and a faint, almost imperceptible roundness began to emerge on her face. The baby, too, was thriving, a testament to her improving health. One evening, as he was about to leave, Ruth stopped him. "Ricardo," she began, her voice hesitant. Can you tell me about the trust fund for the baby?" He turned, a hopeful flicker in his eyes. "Of course. It's a substantial sum, enough to ensure a comfortable life, education, whatever they choose to pursue. It's managed by an independent trustee, so you don't have to worry about any of the details. It's entirely for the baby's future." She nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "And what about me? What about my future?" He met her gaze. "Ruth, whatever you need, a home, a career, anything you want to pursue. I want to help you rebuild your life, your own life, on your terms." She looked at him, a complex mix of emotions in her eyes. Gratitude, certainly, but also a lingering suspicion. "Why, Ricardo? Why are you doing all of this? This isn't just about making amends, is it?" He paused, knowing this was the moment of truth. He could lie, could offer a platitude, or he could try to be honest as he could be, without reopening wounds that were still raw. "Part of it is amends, yes," he admitted, "but also seeing you again, Ruth. Seeing what you've endured, it's forced me to confront the kind of man I became. The man who destroyed our marriage, who prioritized ambition over everything. I don't want to be that man anymore." He took a deep breath. "And seeing you pregnant, knowing what you went through with Leo, it's made me realize the preciousness of life, of family. I know I can't be a father to this child, but I can at least ensure they have a stable, loving environment. And you deserve that stability too, Ruth." She listened, her expression unreadable. "It sounds too good to be true, Ricardo," she finally said, her voice tinged with a faint bitterness. "The man who destroyed me is now my benevolent savior. What's the catch? What do you want from me?" He understood her skepticism. His past actions had earned it. "There's no catch, Ruth. All I want is to see you and the baby healthy and happy, and perhaps one day to earn a measure of your forgiveness. Not for me to return to your life in any romantic sense, but simply to know that I've tried to rectify the wrongs I committed." The suspicion in her eyes didn't completely vanish, but it softened slightly. He knew it would take time, perhaps a lifetime, for her to truly trust his intentions. He also knew he deserved that distrust. He had built his empire on cunning and calculation, and she had every right to expect a hidden agenda. But this time, there was none. This time, his motives were pure, born from a profound regret and a desperate desire for redemption. He had faced his demons on that airplane, and they had shown him the true cost of his ambition. Now, he had to prove to Ruth and to himself that he was capable of change. The shadow of suspicion still clung to their interactions, a testament to the depth of his past betrayal. But Ricardo was determined to dispel it, one selfless act at a time. The road was long and the emotional terrain treacherous, but he was prepared to walk it, however many years it took. Weeks turned into months. Ruth's health blossomed, and the baby grew strong within her. She moved with a newfound energy, her laughter, once a distant memory, now occasionally echoing through the spacious apartment. Ricardo continued his visits, always discreet, always respectful, never crossing the invisible line she had drawn between them. Their conversations became easier, more natural, sometimes even touching on light-hearted topics. She told him about her plans to study graphic design, a passion she'd always harbored but had never pursued due to the demands of their old life. He listened intently, encouraging her, offering to fund her education. One crisp autumn morning, as they sat on the balcony, watching the leaves turn golden, Ruth finally spoke of Leo with a tenderness that allowed Ricardo a glimpse into their love. He was so excited about the baby, she murmured, a soft smile on her lips, a bittersweet sadness in her eyes. He used to sing to my belly every night. He had the most beautiful voice. Ricardo listened, a dull ache in his chest. He had never sung to her. He had been too busy making deals, closing mergers. He had been too busy to truly connect, to truly love. We picked out names, she continued, oblivious to his internal turmoil. If it was a girl, Lily. If it was a boy, he loved the name. Leo Jr. She looked at him then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I still miss him so much, Ricardo. He was everything I needed. He sounds like he was a wonderful man, Ricardo said, his voice surprisingly steady. He meant it. Despite the jealousy, he recognized the depth of love she had found, a love he had failed to give her. A few days later, a pivotal moment arrived. Ruth's due date was approaching, and she was having a routine checkup with her obstetrician, a kind and experienced doctor Ricardo had personally vetted. He was in the waiting room, a rare moment of nervous anticipation making his palms sweat. When the doctor finally emerged, her expression was grave. "Mr. Edmund," she began, her voice hushed. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" He nodded, his heart pounding. "Is Ruth all right? Is the baby okay?" The doctor led him to a private consultation room. "Ruth is fine, physically, but there's something you need to know." She paused, her gaze serious. "We've done extensive genetic testing, given her medical history and her severe anemia. The results came back this morning." She slid a folder across the desk. "Mr. Edmund, the baby's blood type is O negative. Neither Leo nor Ruth have O negative blood. Leo was a positive, and Ruth is B positive." Ricardo stared at the folder, his mind struggling to process the information. Blood types. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew enough about genetics to understand the implications. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor's gaze softened with sympathy. "It means, Mr. Edmund, that Leo cannot be the father of this child. Given the blood types, the father must be either O negative or O positive, if Ruth is B positive. And, well, we have your previous medical records from when you were admitted for stress-related issues a few years ago. Your blood type, Mr. Edmund, is O negative." The words hit him like a physical blow. O negative, his blood type. The world tilted on its axis. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. The baby. Ruth's baby. His baby. The implications flooded his mind, a torrent of disbelief, shock, and a strange, overwhelming joy. The baby was his. Not Leo's. Not some other man's. His. But how? He stammered, his mind racing through the timeline. 5 years. Their divorce. The finality of it all. The doctor, sensing his distress, continued gently. Based on the conception date, which we've pinpointed from the fetal growth, it aligns perfectly with a period around 5.5 years ago. Shortly before your divorce was finalized, if my information is correct. 5.5 years ago. The memory, long buried under layers of regret and professional ambition, surfaced with agonizing clarity. Their final attempt. A desperate, emotionally charged night, fueled by a last-ditch effort to save their marriage. A night of raw vulnerability, of tears and passionate, almost violent making up. He had dismissed it then as a final, desperate act, a last gasp of a dying relationship. He had convinced himself that nothing significant had come of it, that it was merely an emotional purging before the inevitable split. He closed his eyes, the memory vivid, almost tangible. Ruth, her face tear-streaked, in his arms, both of them clinging to a fragile hope that was ultimately doomed. "Ruth, she doesn't know, does she?" he asked, his voice raw. The doctor shook her head. "No. She believes Leo is the father. He was with her during the early stages of her pregnancy, and she has no reason to suspect otherwise. It's a very rare occurrence, particularly with such a significant time gap between potential partners. We wouldn't have even considered it if not for the severe anemia and the subsequent genetic testing." Ricardo felt a maelstrom of emotions swirling within him. Joy, profound and unexpected. Fear, terrifying in its implications, and an immense, crushing weight of responsibility. This child, his child, had been conceived in a moment of desperate hope, born into a world of heartbreak and struggle. He had abandoned them both, unknowingly. He had left his pregnant wife, his child, to fend for themselves, to endure unimaginable hardship. His mind raced, a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. How could he tell Ruth? How could he possibly break this news to her, after everything she had been through, after she had grieved for Leo, believing he was the father? It would be another seismic shock, another betrayal, another wound to an already scarred soul. Yet, how could he not tell her? This was his child, a part of him, a living, breathing testament to the love they had once shared, however flawed and ultimately broken. He looked at the doctor, his eyes pleading. "Please, don't tell her yet. I need time. I need to figure this out." She nodded, her expression compassionate. "I understand, Mr. Edmund, but you must tell her. Eventually. This is her truth, and the child's truth." Ricardo stood, his legs feeling strangely unsteady. He was a father to a child he had unknowingly abandoned. The empire he had built, the power he had amassed, seemed utterly meaningless in the face of this overwhelming, life-altering truth. He walked out of the consultation room, a new man, burdened by an incredible secret, yet invigorated by a profound and terrifying joy. The path to redemption had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more personal. He had to tell Ruth. But how, and when, and what would be the consequences? The answers seemed impossibly distant, shrouded in a future he now had to navigate with agonizing care. The revelation that he was the father of Ruth's child consumed Ricardo. Every interaction with her, every glance at her swelling belly was now imbued with a profound, almost sacred significance. He saw his own features in the faint stirrings beneath her skin, felt a possessive tenderness he had never known. The guilt, which had been a constant companion, intensified, becoming an almost unbearable weight. He had not merely abandoned his wife, he had abandoned his own child, unknowingly consigning them both to a life of hardship. He wrestled with the secret, the truth, a volatile thing that threatened to explode from him at any moment. He practiced conversations in his head, rehearsing the words, anticipating her reactions: anger, disbelief, perhaps even renewed hatred. Each scenario ended in despair. How could he tell her that the man she believed to be the father of her child, the man she had grieved so deeply, was not? How could he shatter her last illusion of happiness, her final connection to Leo? He consulted with Dr. Ortega, who reiterated the importance of telling Ruth, but also advised caution, given her emotional state and the advanced stage of her pregnancy. "She needs stability right now, Mr. Edmund," the doctor warned. "A shock of this magnitude could be detrimental to both her and the baby." Ricardo spent sleepless nights, pacing the luxurious apartment he had rented for Ruth, the city lights a distant, uncaring glow. He knew he couldn't keep this secret forever. It was a ticking time bomb, a betrayal in itself, to withhold such a fundamental truth from her. But how to deliver it without causing irreversible damage? He observed Ruth closely. She was happier now, her grief for Leo still present, but softened by the anticipation of motherhood. She talked about the baby constantly, about Leo's excitement, about the plans they had made. Each word was a fresh stab for Ricardo, a reminder of the beautiful lie she lived, a lie he was now complicit in. One evening, as they were having dinner, a delicious, healthy meal prepared by the chef, Ruth mentioned Leo's family. "I wrote to his parents," she said, a faint smile on her lips. "They're still in shock about his passing, but they were so kind. They want to meet the baby once he or she is born. They said Leo would have wanted that." Ricardo froze, a fork halfway to his mouth. Leo's parents. They believed this was their grandchild. The web of lies, born of his own negligence and the cruel twist of fate, was growing increasingly tangled. He realized then that he couldn't wait any longer. The truth, however painful, had to come out. But he needed to do it carefully, with sensitivity, and with the full understanding of what it would mean for Ruth. He decided to seek advice from an unexpected source: Mary Ortega. He trusted her judgment, her empathy. He told her everything, the raw, unvarnished truth of his past with Ruth, the ambition that had blinded him, the divorce, the final, desperate night. And now, the unbelievable genetic revelation. Mary listened patiently, her expression grave. "This is a profoundly difficult situation, Mr. Edmund," she finally said, "and there's no easy answer. But I believe honesty, tempered with immense compassion, is the only way forward. Ruth is a strong woman, but she has been through so much. You must prepare her." Ricardo nodded, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He knew what he had to do. He would tell her after the baby was born. It would be safer then, both physically and emotionally. He would wait until she had recovered, until the initial joy of motherhood had taken root. He would spend that time carefully, gently, preparing the ground, softening the blow. He continued his attentive visits, but now there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. He was more introspective, more overtly tender, his gaze lingering on Ruth with a newfound intensity. He would bring her small, thoughtful gifts, books she had mentioned, soft blankets for the nursery, soothing herbal teas. He would sit for hours, listening to her talk about her hopes and fears for the baby, offering quiet reassurance. He started to talk about his own childhood, about his distant parents, and the loneliness that had driven him to relentless ambition. He was slowly, painstakingly, peeling back the layers of his guarded persona, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. Ruth noticed the change. Her suspicion, though never entirely absent, began to recede, replaced by a growing curiosity, a tentative warmth. One evening she looked at him, her eyes searching. "You've changed, Ricardo," she said softly. "You're different." He met her gaze, a profound sadness in his eyes. "I hope so, Ruth. I truly hope so. I'm trying to be." He wanted to tell her then, to unburden himself of the crushing secret. But he held back, remembering Dr. Ortega's words. She needs stability right now. The days crawled by, each one bringing them closer to the baby's arrival and closer to the inevitable, terrifying revelation. Ricardo prepared for the birth with a meticulousness that bordered on obsession. He ensured the finest hospital suite was booked, a team of top specialists on standby. He even bought a small, delicate silver locket engraved with the initials R.E. and L.K., a small, symbolic gesture for the child, a silent acknowledgement of the complex tapestry of their origins. He knew the initial R.E. represented him, and L.K. for Leo Kelso, a father figure who had loved the child without knowing. As Ruth's due date drew near, a new kind of tension filled the air. It wasn't just the anticipation of birth, but the looming shadow of the truth. Ricardo knew that once the baby was in her arms, once she held their child, the stakes would be even higher. He would be changing, not just her perception of him, but her entire understanding of the past few years, of her love for Leo, of the very identity of her child. The unspoken truth was a powerful, destructive force. But Ricardo was finally ready to unleash it, hoping against hope that its unveiling would, ultimately, lead to healing, not further devastation. The moment of reckoning was fast approaching, and Ricardo knew he had to be ready, not just to confess, but to face the full, unsparing force of Ruth's pain. The day Ruth went into labor was a flurry of controlled chaos. Ricardo, usually composed, found himself a nervous wreck, pacing the hospital hallways, his mind a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. He stayed by her side, holding her hand, offering words of encouragement, his presence a steady anchor for her through the intense hours of labor. He saw a resilience in her he had never truly appreciated before, a primal strength that awed him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a new life entered the world. A beautiful, healthy baby boy. His cries, strong and clear, filled the delivery room, a sound that pierced Ricardo's heart with an indescribable mixture of joy and profound sorrow. Ruth, exhausted but radiant, held her son close, tears streaming down her face. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "My little Leo." Ricardo watched her, his heart aching. "He is," he agreed, his own voice hoarse. He reached out, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. The baby squeezed his finger, a reflex that felt like a powerful connection, a silent confirmation of their bond. He saw Ruth's features in the baby's delicate face, the hint of her auburn hair already visible. But he also saw something else, a familiarity in the shape of the nose, the curve of the chin. His own. The days that followed were filled with the quiet joy of a new mother. Ruth was completely absorbed in her son, nurturing him, singing to him, showering him with love. Ricardo continued his visits, maintaining a respectful distance, helping where he could, but always with the unspoken truth hanging heavy between them, a sword of Damocles. He watched her bonding with the baby, and the thought of shattering that fragile peace, that blissful ignorance, filled him with dread. Dr. Ortega, who had been a quiet confidant, gently urged him. "You can't wait much longer, Mr. Edmund. The longer you wait, the harder it will be. For everyone." He knew she was right. He had to tell her. But how? He decided to approach it slowly, to create an environment of trust and openness. One afternoon, as Ruth was feeding the baby, Ricardo sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the tiny face. "Ruth," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Can we talk about our past?" She looked up, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "Our past? Why now, Ricardo?" Because there are things I need to tell you. Things I should have told you years ago." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Things that will change how you see everything." She put the baby down in the bassinet beside her, her expression now serious. "What is it, Ricardo? You're scaring me." "Remember that last night?" he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Before the divorce was finalized, the night we tried to reconcile, to save our marriage?" A shadow crossed her face. "Yes, I remember. It was a painful night. We both knew it was over, even then." "I thought so too," he said, meeting her gaze, his eyes pleading for her understanding. "But something happened that night, Ruth. Something we didn't know about." He paused, the words catching in his throat. "When you collapsed on the plane, the doctors did extensive tests. Genetic tests. They needed to understand why you were so ill, particularly with the pregnancy." Ruth's eyes widened, a dawning horror in their depths. "What are you saying, Ricardo?" "The baby's blood type, Ruth. It's O negative." He forced himself to say the words, each one a painful shard. "Neither you nor Leo had O negative blood." "Ruth, I do. I'm O negative." The air in the room seemed to thicken, the silence deafening. Ruth stared at him, her face paling, her eyes growing wide with disbelief, then a growing fury. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, you're lying. You're trying to hurt me again. This is Leo's baby." "Ruth, please listen," he pleaded, reaching out, but she recoiled, pulling away from him. "The conception date aligns perfectly with that night, just before our divorce. The doctors confirmed it. There's no other explanation." Tears welled up in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of betrayal, of incandescent rage. "You mean to tell me," she said, her voice rising, trembling with anger, "that for all these months, for all this time, I've been mourning Leo, believing this was his child, grieving that he never met his son. And it was you. All along, it was your child." He nodded, his heart breaking at the raw pain in her voice. "Yes, Ruth, it's my child." Our child, she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You abandoned our child, Ricardo. You left me with nothing, with no idea, to raise him alone, struggling, while you lived your life of luxury, oblivious." She pointed a trembling finger at him. "You are a monster, Ricardo Edmund. You didn't just break my heart, you stole my truth. You stole Leo's legacy. How could you do this to me?" Her words, sharp and laced with justified venom, pierced him to the core. He deserved every one of them. He had wanted to soften the blow, to prepare her, but there was no softening a truth so devastating, a betrayal so profound. He watched, helpless, as her carefully constructed world, her sanctuary of grief and hopeful anticipation, shattered around her. Her face, usually so gentle when looking at her son, was now contorted with a mixture of heartbreak and a rage he had rarely witnessed. He knew then that the path to redemption, which he had so tentatively begun, had just been obliterated. He was not a savior. He was still the villain, the architect of her suffering, a constant source of pain in her life. The newly born hope for a future, for their child, was now buried under the rubble of a shattered truth, and he feared, with a chilling certainty, that it might be lost forever. Ruth's anger was a storm, devastating and unyielding. She screamed, she cried, she hurled accusations at Ricardo, each word a physical blow. He stood there, unmoving, absorbing every ounce of her pain, every justified condemnation. He deserved it. He deserved to feel the full, unadulterated force of her wrath. "Get out!" she finally shrieked, her voice raw, tears streaming down her face. "Get out of my sight, Ricardo. I never want to see you again. You've ruined everything again." He wanted to argue, to plead, to explain the nuances of his ignorance, the depths of his remorse. But her pain was too raw, too profound. He knew words would be meaningless now. He simply nodded, his heart a leaden weight in his chest, and walked out of the room, leaving her with their newborn son and the shattered pieces of her world. He retreated to the apartment he had rented nearby, the silence of it amplifying his self-loathing. He had meant to help, to atone, but he had only caused more devastation. He had ripped away her peace, her understanding of her own child's lineage, her ability to grieve Leo in peace. He had, once again, proven himself to be the destructive force in her life. Dr. Ortega called him later that evening, her voice tinged with concern. "Ruth is devastated, Ricardo. She's asked me to ensure you have no further contact with her. She needs space, time to process this." "I understand," he managed, his voice hollow. "Just please ensure she and the baby are all right, that they have everything they need." "They will," Dr. Ortega assured him. "I'll be monitoring her closely, but you need to respect her wishes, Ricardo." He spent the next few days in a self-imposed exile, consumed by despair. He watched the news, managed his empire, but it all felt meaningless, a hollow echo of his former ambition. He had achieved everything he had ever wanted in the corporate world, only to find himself utterly bankrupt in the human one. He decided to leave Portland. His presence was only causing her pain. He flew back to his penthouse in New York, the vastness of the city mirroring the emptiness within him. He instructed his staff to continue providing for Ruth and the baby, but to do so discreetly, ensuring she never had to directly interact with his resources if she chose not to. He set up an even larger trust fund for the baby, a safety net that would secure their financial future for generations. He vowed to himself that he would never interfere with her life again, not unless she sought him out. He would respect her boundaries, however painful it was for him. Months passed. He received sporadic updates from Dr. Ortega, relayed through his lawyers, always assuring him that Ruth and the baby were doing well. The baby, a boy named Leo, was thriving. The news, though filtered through a professional intermediary, was a balm to his tormented soul. He would often look at old photos of Ruth, of them together, remembering a time before his ambition had consumed them. He would then look at a discreet photo of baby Leo, sent by Dr. Ortega, a tiny, innocent face that was a constant reminder of his greatest failure and his most profound, unspoken love. He began to change, fundamentally and irrevocably. The ruthless CIO, the man obsessed with power and wealth, slowly began to unravel. He started delegating more, stepping back from the relentless pursuit of expansion. He focused on philanthropic endeavors, quietly funding medical research, establishing foundations for single mothers and children in need. He sold off some of his more ethically questionable ventures, investing in sustainable technologies and social impact projects. His board members noticed the shift. His closest confidants expressed concern, but he was deaf to their worries. He was on a different path now, a path of quiet atonement, seeking to rebuild himself from the wreckage of his past. Ruth, meanwhile, was slowly rebuilding her own life. The initial shock and anger had given way to a deep, lingering sadness and a quiet determination. She fiercely protected her son, showering him with love, determined to give him the best life possible, despite the complicated truth of his parentage. She continued her graphic design studies, finding solace and purpose in creativity. She eventually reconnected with Leo's parents, telling them the truth about the baby's biological father, a difficult conversation that was met with initial shock, but ultimately with understanding and a continued desire to be a part of their grandson's life. They understood her love for Leo and saw the child as a continuation of his spirit, regardless of bloodlines. One day, almost a year after the birth of baby Leo, Ricardo received an unexpected email. It was from Ruth. His heart hammered in his chest as he opened it. The message was brief, almost clinical. "Ricardo, I need to talk to you. About Leo. And about us." His breath caught. She wanted to talk. After all this time. A fragile seed of hope, long dormant, began to stir within him. He didn't know what she wanted, whether it was to demand more, to condemn him further, or to finally, perhaps, offer a path to understanding. But he knew, with every fiber of his being, that he had to go. The path to redemption, he realized, was not a linear one. It was a winding, treacherous road, full of unexpected detours and agonizing detours. But for Ruth and for their son, he was willing to walk it, however long and arduous it might be. The aftermath of truth was painful, but it had also, perhaps, opened a tiny crack for healing to begin. Ricardo flew back to Portland with a mixture of trepidation and a desperate, fragile hope. He had spent the past year living in a self-imposed purgatory, carrying the weight of his past actions and the unspoken truth. The email from Ruth was a lifeline, a chance, however slim, to bridge the chasm he had created. He met her at a quiet cafe, far from the bustling city center. She looked different. Stronger, more composed. The soft lines of motherhood had replaced the haunted fragility he had first seen on the airplane. She held herself with unquiet dignity. A woman who had faced immense hardship and emerged, if not unscathed, then certainly resilient. "Ricardo," she said, her voice calm, devoid of the raw anger he remembered. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for asking me to," he replied, his voice a little hoarse. He noted the careful distance between them, a physical manifestation of the emotional boundaries she still maintained. "I wanted to talk about Leo," she began, her gaze steady. "My son, I mean. He's doing well. He's starting to walk, to say a few words. He's a very happy, curious child." A warmth spread through Ricardo's chest. "I'm so glad to hear that," he said, genuinely. "Dr. Ortega's reports have been reassuring," she nodded. "I've told Leo's parents everything. It was difficult, but they understood. They still consider him their grandson, and they've been incredibly supportive." A faint smile touched her lips. "They even visit regularly." Ricardo felt a pang of relief. That was one less burden for her to carry, one less lie. "But I also wanted to talk about you," she continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "And about us. Or rather, the truth." She took a deep breath. "Ricardo, it took me a long time to process everything. The shock, the anger, the feeling of betrayal. It was overwhelming. I hated you. I truly did." He flinched but remained silent, accepting her words. "But then," she continued, her gaze direct, "I started to see how much you've done. The apartment, the medical care, the trust fund, the way you respected my wishes, leaving me alone when I asked. And I've seen the change in you, Ricardo. Even from afar, through Dr. Ortega's occasional comments, through your company's actions." She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You've been helping others, haven't you? Silently, anonymously." He nodded, surprised she had noticed. "I've tried." "It's a start," she said, a hint of something akin to acknowledgement in her voice. "It doesn't undo the past, Ricardo. It doesn't erase the pain you caused me, or the struggles I endured because of your actions. But it shows a willingness to change, to truly atone." A fragile hope flickered within him. "Does that mean... Can we move forward?" he asked, barely daring to breathe. "Not romantically, Ruth. I know that's impossible. But as parents, for Leo." She looked at him, her eyes searching, and he saw a flicker of the old Ruth, the woman who had once loved him, deep beneath the layers of pain and resilience. "I'm still angry, Ricardo, and I'm still hurting. But Leo deserves to know his father. He deserves to have you in his life, if you're truly the man you claim to be now." His heart soared, a mix of relief and a profound sense of responsibility. "I am, Ruth. I truly am. I'll do whatever it takes, whatever you need." "Then I have a condition," she said, her gaze firm. "I want to be involved in the management of Leo's trust fund. I want to learn about finance, about investing. I want to be an active participant in his future, not just a recipient of your generosity." A genuine smile touched his lips. "Of course. That's an excellent idea. I'd be happy to teach you, to guide you. Or you can learn independently, with full access to all the resources. Whatever you prefer. And," she continued, her voice softening slightly, "I want you to spend time with him. Slowly. Gently. Let him get to know you, not as the millionaire CEO, but as his father. When I'm ready. When he's ready." "Anything, Ruth," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Anything at all. I'll respect your pace, your terms." She nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "Good. Then I think we can try. For Leo." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A tentative path towards a future where their shared son could know both his parents, where the wounds of the past could, perhaps, slowly, painstakingly, begin to heal. Ricardo knew it would be a long, arduous journey, filled with emotional challenges and lingering resentments. But for the first time in years, he felt a genuine sense of purpose, a true redemption. He had lost everything, gained it all back, and then nearly lost it again. Now, he was being given a chance to be truly human, to be a father, to earn, slowly and painfully, a place in the lives of the two people who mattered most. The path towards forgiveness was open, however narrow, and Ricardo was ready to walk it, one step at a time, for Leo, and for the fragile hope of a new, unforeseen future. The first meeting between Ricardo and his son, Leo, was carefully orchestrated by Ruth. It happened in a neutral space, a children's museum, where the joyful chaos of other families offered a gentle distraction. Ricardo was a bundle of nerves, his usual corporate composure completely absent. He felt like an awkward teenager on a first date, desperate to make a good impression. Leo, a bright-eyed toddler with a mischievous grin and a mop of curly auburn hair that was undeniably Ruth's, was initially shy. He clung to Ruth's leg, peeking out at Ricardo with cautious curiosity. Ricardo, usually so confident in his interactions, found himself at a loss for words. He knelt down, offering a small, brightly colored toy car and a tentative smile. "Hello, Leo," he said, his voice softer than Ruth had ever heard it. Leo, after a moment of consideration, reached out a tiny hand and took the car. He then, to Ricardo's utter surprise and delight, climbed into his lap, his small weight a profound and overwhelming presence. Ricardo held him close, inhaling the sweet scent of baby shampoo, tears pricking his eyes. This was his son, a part of him, a part of Ruth, a living testament to a love that had once been and now, miraculously, had found a fragile new beginning. From that day forward, Ricardo became a consistent, albeit measured, presence in Leo's life. He never pushed, always respecting Ruth's boundaries and Leo's comfort level. He learned to play on the floor, to build towers of blocks, to read picture books with exaggerated voices. He discovered a joy he never knew existed, a fulfillment far greater than any business deal or financial conquest. He would watch Leo interact with Ruth, a mother completely devoted, and a quiet admiration for her strength, her resilience, grew within him. Ruth, true to her word, began to learn about finance. Ricardo, keeping his promise, became her mentor, patiently explaining market trends, investment strategies, and the intricacies of managing a trust fund. He saw her sharp intellect, a quality he had once admired and then overlooked, reawaken and flourish. She quickly grasped complex concepts, asking insightful questions that challenged his own long-held assumptions. Their professional interactions, while still strictly business, fostered a new kind of respect, a quiet acknowledgement of each other's capabilities. They even started to talk about Leo's future together, discussing schools, interests, potential hobbies. They found themselves, unexpectedly, co-parenting, a strange and evolving partnership born from the ashes of their shattered marriage. There were still moments of tension, lingering resentment, particularly when old wounds were inadvertently reopened. But they learned to navigate them, to communicate, to prioritize Leo's well-being above their own lingering hurts. One afternoon, as they were watching Leo chase pigeons in the park, Ruth turned to Ricardo. "You know," she said softly, a faint smile on her lips. "Leo's a lot like Leo." Ricardo understood. She wasn't talking about his biological father, but about the Leo she had loved, the artist. "He has a kind heart," he agreed, watching their son laugh as the pigeons scattered. "And he has your eyes," she added, her gaze meeting his, a surprisingly gentle look in their depths. "And sometimes he has your stubbornness." He chuckled, a genuine, unforced sound. "I suppose that's fair. I still don't completely forgive you, Ricardo," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The pain, the betrayal, it runs deep, but I'm not angry anymore. And I'm grateful. Grateful for what you've done, for what you're doing, and for our son." He looked at her, his heart swelling with a gratitude that brought tears to his eyes. "That's more than I ever dared to hope for, Ruth. Thank you." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no grand reunion, no rekindling of romance. The scars of their past were too deep, too numerous. But what they had found was something perhaps even more profound. A shared purpose, a mutual respect, and a commitment to their son's happiness. Ricardo had found his redemption not in the accumulation of wealth, but in the quiet, selfless act of fatherhood, in the slow, painstaking process of earning back the trust of the woman he had wronged. He sold his sprawling penthouse in New York and bought a more modest, family-friendly home in Portland, closer to Ruth and Leo. He restructured Edmund Technologies, shifting its focus toward sustainable and ethical ventures, creating a legacy that reflected his changed values. He spent more time with his son, teaching him, guiding him, being a presence he had never known he could be. The millionaire who had seen his pregnant ex-wife collapse on an airplane, the man who had been consumed by ambition, had found his true wealth not in the zeros of his bank account, but in the laughter of his son, the quiet respect of his co-parent, and the slowly unfolding, messy but ultimately fulfilling journey of redemption. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in his life, Ricardo faced it not with a hunger for power, but with a heart full of hope and a quiet, abiding love for his son, Leo. Ricardo Edman, the titan of industry, found his greatest fortune not in boardrooms, but in a quiet park, watching his son chase pigeons. The journey from that fateful airplane aisle, where he witnessed the fragile collapse of his ex-wife, Ruth, to this moment of quiet contentment, was a tapestry woven with betrayal, profound regret, and the arduous, beautiful threads of redemption. He learned that true power wasn't in commanding empires, but in humbly accepting responsibility, in patiently earning trust, and in sacrificing personal ambition for the pure, unadulterated love of a child. Ruth, scarred but resilient, discovered her strength not in clinging to the past, but in forging a new future, a future shared, cautiously and respectfully, with the man who had once been her greatest heartbreak, and was now, unexpectedly, her co-parent. Their story, a testament to the complex, unpredictable nature of human connection, reminds us that even in the deepest shadows of despair, a path to healing and even love can emerge. What a journey for Ricardo and Ruth. If you were moved by their story of second chances and unexpected turns, hit that like button. Share this emotional tale with someone who needs a reminder that redemption is always possible, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories that explore the depths of the human heart. Let us know in the comments, what do you think was Ricardo's biggest turning point?